Felly, noswaith dda pawb. Good evening. Diolch, Sugar Mint. Thank you so much for having me. I'm quite gutted that I am not in another place physically, but I am in the place that I am physically, so that's all right. I guess I can be grateful for that in some strange way. So, this is the first one of these that I have kind of attended. Oh, it looks like we've lost someone there, but never mind. Yeah, this is the first one of these that I've attended, so it's kind of interesting now to launch into talking about it when I've talking about this when I've not really experienced another kind of framework like this. But yeah, I'm going to say a little bit about who I am and what I do, and then I'm going to take you on a little bit of a strange meander of my philosophizing and see if you have any thoughts about that at the end. So I'm a dancer, I'm also a therapist, and I work generally in the community, like doing a lot of work around building sustainable relationships to self and other and the more than human. And this kind of generally comes out through like doing movement and dance, but I do a lot of writing and drawing, and the kind of teaching is also quite a big part of like my creative practice. And I'm kind of interested in this idea of nurturing a sense of everyday animism. So some of you might know what that is, but animism is the practice of understanding that all things are beings and that all beings are interconnected. So imagining playing with this kind of philosophical perspective in the everyday is a way of attempting to make space a little bit for the way in which we can maybe kind of open to the aliveness of the world. It feels as if we're in a bit of a crux moment in relation to that. And yeah, so thinking about also the way in which maybe that opening can make space for a magic, maybe something of kind of the spirit, or maybe also something a little bit monstrous. I guess in some ways it feels a little bit more like a life practice, but maybe that's also what art is in the end. So yeah. So I make a lot of site-specific work. I make video and screen dance, I write, I make illustrations, but my main practice is in facilitation and teaching and holding space and kind of doing work with groups, in kind of collaboration and co-creation. So I've done things like make a site-specific performance with a group of women in North London in a community garden, and they are women who've experienced some form of trauma related to sexual violence or domestic violence. And we made this performance all around a tree in this community garden. And there was something very interesting in kind of bringing that into an inner city space. And then, yeah, other bits of work that I've done are also, I was working for a hospice charity in Aberystwyth and running a project for them all about creating space in the body to be in relationship with grief. So yeah, kind of different things, but a lot of them somehow meandering around each other. So before I get into something that's a bit too frontal cortex and me babbling on for a bit, I thought it would be quite nice to do a short little movement score together. I know that it can be a bit weird doing this on Zoom. I don't know if anyone's had any experience of this, maybe you have. But I have found that it can actually be really quite beautiful to connect with people through this screen. And maybe we can see it as some sort of gentle sort of ritual to bring a sense of place to this gathering of people. Is everyone, you kind of up for that? I'm not going to get you to do any huge balletic movements, don't worry. It's very simple. If you want to, you can. I'd be super up for that as well. Yeah! We'll see at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a timer on for about, I'm going to say 2 minutes. And somebody's going to begin by offering a posture or a gesture with the hands, with the arms. It can be with the whole body if you want. So a posture is kind of a motion that is stillness, and then a gesture is in movement. It can be a combination of those. And we as a group are going to mirror, we're going to echo that offering. And then somebody else is going to offer another offering. And we're going to just move through the different offerings and see what emerges. And we're going to do it for about 2 minutes. So don't worry, nobody's on the spot. It's really fine. You can just do one finger. It's all good. It's kind of a little practice also in like noticing. So seeing how we can like be with each other, even though I'm not with you, and that makes me very sad. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah? Getting nods. Everyone in Veronica's room, is that kind of making sense? I don't know if they can.
Yeah, we're just trying to rearrange ourselves so we can all receive.
Okay, shall I? Did you hear what I was just offering there, or shall I explain it again?
Maybe explain it again because we were trying to move things around. Okay. We can just do it as you tell us what to do.
Great, okay, well, I'll just really quickly run through it. I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. Somebody's going to offer a small gesture or posture with the hands or with the whole body. And then the rest of the group is going to mirror that gesture. And we're just doing a little ritual of gathering, of kind of coming together and kind of finding a way of reaching through the ether somehow so that we can have a sense, a felt sense of the group. Okay? We'll get it, don't worry, it's not that complicated. Right, let me just pop this on. So I'm going to do it for 2 minutes. Do you reckon that's enough time? That doesn't feel too small. My dog coming in and out of the room, unfortunately. So I'm so part of it. Ah, look, more dogs. The more than human is all here. All right, here we go.
So let's just do a gesture.
Oh, thank you.
That was great. I've done that in real life. I've never done it on Zoom.
Great on Zoom. There's something about it that for me that really feels like all of a sudden you enter into a different dimension and you're kind of there like, wow, I don't know, like somehow reaching into all of these spaces. There's also something really nice because there's like this red space here in Eleanor Greenwood's space, and then there's this quite blue space in Ginny, and then this yellow space and then this white space. So there's something kind of, I don't know, all of a sudden we can kind of weave in, create a space somehow, maybe. I'd love to hear what you think about that afterwards, but we'll get there. So now, I have two things that I wanted to talk to you about. And hopefully I'm going to meander around and then they're going to meet somewhere interesting. So the first thing is to do with this Mesolithic flint tool that I was lucky enough to come across when I was doing some dance practice down by the river, the Afon Teifi, which I'm currently in St Dogmell's in North Pembrokeshire, and I'm right on the estuary of the Teifi. And an old friend of mine, who is now the manager of Castell Tentllys, which is an Iron Age hill fort, and she has a PhD in archaeology, and she confirmed to me that it's a Mesolithic flint tool. So that's not just me making it up. I have an expert confirmation. And the second thing is a little bit related to the work that I do with something called the Dpj Foundation, which is a charity that provides free therapy to the farming community in Wales. So here's my flint tool. I found this on one of my daily visits to the river, and I kind of saw it. I saw it kind of in the mud, and I was like, oh, that looks like it could be a something. And lo and behold, it is. There's something kind of really interesting in the way that I picked it up and I intuitively held it in like a very specific way. And my friend then told me, like, yeah, this is how they would have held it. And so I have been spending a lot of time by the river, and I'm really interested in the way that the river holds space. So holds space in a kind of geographic sense. It separates Pembrokeshire from Ceredigion, but it also, like, it's this kind of estuary place. You can kind of cross sometimes if the tide is very low, but generally you can't really cross. The only place that you can cross is a lot further up the river in Cardigan. And so in my dancing and my moving by the river, I have been pondering how rivers are space holders. They're not borders or boundaries. They're maybe thresholds, kind of in a multi-directional sense, moving out into the ocean from source to sea, but also thresholds between one bank and another. And there was something about finding this flint that was like, it was also a threshold of time. There was something of a kind of time travel that then happened, of like picking up this thing that was maybe even made back as far as 10,000 years ago, and thinking about how I just kind of like picked it, held it instinctively, felt the way that it had been chipped and weathered by a Mesolithic hunter-gatherer hand, and feeling how I was moving it and moving with it, and feeling how that movement was also a movement of an ancestor in some sort of way. And something also kind of interesting in flint isn't found around here usually. It's found on the East Coast. So thinking about the way that it's made its way through trade, through like probably even maybe flowing down the waters of the Teifi, it might have been dropped much further up than on the banks of the Teifi. So thinking about this kind of human journeying of this object and the non-human journeying of the object, and that really kind of came alive in my moving. And yeah, I guess I was thinking also about the way in which the person who made this way back when would probably be so horrified at the fact that we live in such an unanimated world, that we have this notion of nature being something that we are not part of. And I really just found it a very humbling experience. And I really you know, I know that touch is important. I'm a dancer. That's the way that I work. I work with sensation. You know, I had thought that I had an understanding of the importance of touch and of kind of this kind of thing. And then feeling this stone in my hand, I had this whole new sense of this like touching of something that reaches back in time, but that somehow also it's reaching forward to me. So this multi-directional, it's not a linear thing. I move around a lot as I talk, as you may have noticed, so that helps me think. Yeah. So I wrote a little. I do a lot of writing after I move, and I wanted to share with you some of my writing after one of the times where I'd been kind of pondering this threshold idea. So here's what I wrote. Cold but so brilliantly bright, enticing and flirting with a heart made heavy by winter grey. Moon high, yellowing horizon reaching up into blue moon garnished sky. Even the mud is glowing. Today I dance a curlew dance. I find myself strutting up and down the water's edge, dipping and curling, puffing my chest. It feels joyous, a celebration, a homage, becoming bird. The water is so calm. Today not thick with stillness, but shimmering. Robin has come also to watch me. I feel myself untangling from the overly human. It's such a tricky net to be free of. Now the birds are making their way to their night roosts, gulls, jackdaws, rooks. Maybe later the geese will pass. Gently the palette of the sky changes as I write, weighted down with the gravity of dusk. I feel I could be edgeless, an exciting blurriness around the edges of me. My limbs move, neck, torso are curling through the cold air, bird-like, me-like. How could I take full ownership over this river dance? It is only mine in part. It is difficult to know the thresholds between what moves, what is being moved, what is moving. There is much to learn from that difficulty. I often, when I talk about my practice, I often think that people must think that I must look really quite mad moving around on the banks of a river, but maybe I also need to shake free of that a little bit as well. But yeah, because I also grew up in this village, I'm also kind of quite aware of all the people who have known me all these years and how they see me moving around, but they've always seen me doing that, so that's fine. So I'm going to jump for a second and talk a tiny bit about some of the movement therapy work that I do. So I have permission to talk about some bits of this work that I've been doing with this very lovely man. I'm not going to share any details or names or any identifiable qualities, but there's something important, I think, that would be nice to share, and I'm going to call him David for the sake of this story. So a few weeks into our meetings, David began to share with me how he would talk to his sheep. So David is a farmer. How much he loved them, how much their company meant to him. Then he began to share with me that he would visit them at night and sit in the field in the dark, and they would come to him, and he really felt like there was communication between him and these sheep. And I was already just really struck by this, because I thought, it's already breaking down a lot of prejudice that I think I had in relation to the farming community of Wales, that I'll say a little bit more about in a second. So a few weeks further on into the sessions, he started to tell me about how this barn owl would also visit him. So he would sit there in the night with his sheep, and then this barn owl would come, and he would be in different places because the sheep would be moving around. And for quite a few weeks, this barn owl would return and kind of come and find him, and he was certain it was the same barn owl. like, and it felt as if that was the case. I mean, there aren't so many barn owls around anyway, so you know, that felt like something very important for him to honor. And the more he spoke about it, the more he began to kind of delve into a more than human relationship that was really, really quite astounding to me, and very humbling. I grew up in around here, and I went to a school that was kind of, it was mainly the farming community that were with me in school. But I am from, well, my parents are from London, and I was born in Wales, so I sit in this kind of quite strange place between not quite being properly Welsh, even though I'm fluent in Welsh and I've lived here all my life, and I was born just up the river, and the fact that I'm not quite from here. But there was something in meeting Dafydd and having this kind of interaction that he was also really exploring through his body, talking about the sensation that would arise when this barn owl visited him, that felt like it was totally flipping on its head everything that I had ever thought about the way that the farming community disconnects from the land. And it got me thinking a lot about rewilding, and the rewilding kind of tension that exists in Wales as in other places, I'm sure. And some of you might be even more knowledgeable than I am about these things. I know that, like, up in Machynlleth, there's quite a lot of tension between the farming community and those who are wanting to rewild the Welsh uplands. And I just thought about the way in which this polarization was just so heartbreaking, and that finding there was something in the meeting between Dafydd and I that then allowed him to kind of touch on a different way of thinking, that wasn't, we weren't in a polarized relationship, and therefore it didn't have to be me telling him, you know, industrial farming is killing the planet. Like, he didn't have to be telling me, oh, it's vegetarians that are destroying the livelihoods of the Welsh farmers, kind of thing. There was something that was beyond that. So I'm just drawing in all of my thoughts. And I suppose what I'm kind of meandering towards is that there's something about thresholds and having a relationship to thresholds that can allow for the unexpected. There was something in the way that Dafydd spoke about his stepping out, particularly stepping out into the night, that was like he was stepping through a threshold into a way in which to be with the more than human in a different sort of way than the way that maybe the people who he's surrounded by are permissive of. And also this kind of threshold that connects. So it's connecting language, kind of place, people, more than human, history, our hunter-gatherer ancestors who moved across the land from the east coast to the west with this flint tool, dropping it who knows where. And perhaps something that we have done in over a long period of time, I think, is close the doors to these thresholds. So we then see through a lens, we are separated from, and we no longer view them as thresholds that we can kind of cross over with awe, with humility. And I kind of wanted to end with this very short little anecdote of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Witch's Cauldron it's in Pembrokeshire, Pwll y Wrach. It's a sunken-in sea cave, and it's very, very beautiful, and it's one of my favourite places to visit. And you can swim under the cliff through this cave. And I went there in the summer of 2020, and it was very, very busy. And it's the busiest I'd ever seen it. And as I was swimming through, where I had swum many times before, I heard this young man say to his friend, "Wow, it's like a theme park here." And it really just like, whew, it like really hit me. And I initially felt this real rage at him, and then had to kind of go through this whole process of forgiveness. And I think that a little bit, and forgiveness also to myself, of like, I know that I'm just as guilty of moving through space without paying attention to it, or without paying attention to myself. And I think that a lot of what I wish to practice, and what I find really important about my art practice, is the fact that it's a place where I can continue to nurture that. It's an ever evolving practice. And yeah, so I'm kind of coming to the end. I guess I have a question for you, that maybe, does anyone have an idea of a way that we could bring the sacredness of the threshold back? It feels like if we can do that, then many things related to this polarization, to this belonging, to this relationship to land as being animate, might become a little easier. I'm asking you because I don't know the answer. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my talking.